on Zoom as well.
Got it.
Sorry, we're on YouTube as well. Yeah, okay, carry on.
Okay, excellent. So first of all, we usually start off our meetings with a little prayer. So we're going to just do the Ganesh mantra to remove our obstacles. So before we do that, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So before we're going to start the prayers now, and then I'll do a quick introduction on Fred and the objective of today's webinar. So Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samarprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So yeah, so today's meeting is with Fred. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Fred Kratt is a Faith and Communities Navigator at the West Midlands Violence Reduction Partnership, VRP for short, which is a part of the Police and Crimes Commissioner. Originally from London, Fred moved to Coventry 5 years ago, and after completing his university studies, Fred worked for the Bishop of Coventry for 3 years as his chaplaincy, parliamentary assistant, and communities engagement lead. Fred's current role as a Faith and Communities Navigator's VRP involves working with diverse faith communities across the West Midlands to find and promote practical ways to help reduce and prevent serious youth violence and exploitation. So today's webinar is based on that. And I've had the privilege of meeting Fred. Was it on Tuesday, was it? Was it Tuesday?
It was on Wednesday, yesterday.
Wednesday, sorry, yeah. Wednesday. And that was the first time I met him, but I've been working with him for about, I think about a year and a half now in different
thereabouts, yeah.
So yeah, and I think he's doing a fabulous job. So hence we give him the opportunity today to give an insight of what he wants to achieve today. So far away, Fred, the platform's yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jazz, and great to be with you. I'm also here with another colleague from the Violence Reduction Partnership, Ziba. And Ziba, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Evening, everybody. So my name is Ziba. Apologies in advance. Few hiccups on the way here, so I've just had to pop up into a nearby cafe to be able to join you guys today for this meeting. Hence, there might be a bit of a lag in the internet connection, but it's looking stable so far. So as Fred said, I also work for the Violence Reduction Partnership within the exploitation team.
No, first of all, apologies as well on our side. I think because we were so late, we probably lost a handful of people, but you know, we've got to make the most of what it is. And also, if it comes down to it, we'll definitely do another one soon again to, you know, make sure we achieve what we want to do.
Sure, no problem. Well, thanks for your having us. And I'd like to kick off the kind of time with you with a short film. We've recently published. Jazzy will have seen this yesterday. But just for those who are joining us for the first time, just to give people a sense of what our work is about. Before I do that, the Violence Reduction Partnership is part of the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office in the West Midlands. And we have a broad remit from the Home Office to reduce serious youth violence, particularly those obviously under the age of 25. And our approach is something called the public health approach. And that's about bringing lots of different sectors together around this issue, because it is so complex and so interlinked, lots of different factors. And I heard something really good today. We had a youth conference today in Coventry. And one of the young people said, you know, all these issues in society are so interlinked and connected. Why is it that our public services are not so connected and interlinked? Why are they always working in silo? And so that's really part of our work, is to bring these different sectors together: education, health, police, criminal justice, communities, because they all have a role to play in helping to reduce serious youth violence and tackle those underlying causes, which we'll talk a little about in a second. But the reason I kind of, you know, particularly want to talk to you guys today is because the work of the Faith Alliance, which is quite unique actually, part of our work nationally actually around youth violence prevention, because here in the West Midlands uniquely we've invested resource and time and staff into exploring the particular role of faith communities in helping to reduce serious youth violence. And whilst this is touched on in other parts of the country, it's not had the same attention. And so we're kind of helping to lead the way really in terms of promoting and showcasing the role that different faith communities, diverse groups can help to support, safeguard and protect and help young people to thrive. And so hopefully you'll get a sense of that through the film that I'm just going to show you now. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and you should get an insight into that.
Today, we stand together as one community. We call for an end to violence and aggression in our towns and cities
that causes division, despair and death. We live for a shared future,
where our homes and streets are safe places again.
We declare that the power of love and forgiveness is stronger than the power of fear and revenge.
We will not be afraid. We will each play our part. We will choose.
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 We will choose
to believe in hope.
Cool. So hopefully that that came through clearly, and you could see and listen to that film. Can you confirm that, Jazz? Was that all good?
It worked fine on my side, Fred. I was able to hear it and see it clearly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eva. Great. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation with you now. But just a quick commentary on that film, really. It's hopefully it gives a demonstration of the breadth of the sort of work that faith communities do, and we've seen that so clearly over the last couple of years anyway in response to the pandemic, how faith communities have really been at the forefront of helping to meet social needs, and that's really kind of the same energy and spirit that we want to continue in this work to tackle, you know, some really deep-rooted entrenched issues in our society, such that the next generation don't have to grow up in fear of you know, looking over their shoulder and worrying about violence or exploitation in their communities. That they can grow up in safer communities where they can you know, follow their potential and fulfill their potential. You may have noticed that there was a Hindu temple represented in that film, Balaji Temple in Oldbury, in the Sandwell area, and we worked closely with them, and are really keen to expand our connections with the Hindu community across the West Midlands, so that we can learn from you, we can learn about the good work that you're doing in the community, we can promote good practice with our other faith communities, but also we can impart some of the best practice that other faith communities are doing in terms of, for example, you know, there's a Christian-run network of safe spaces for young people which are based out of churches. We'd love to kind of impart some of the best practice and learning that they've got. Similarly, in the Muslim community, around raising awareness of various issues, actually, you know, that we've worked closely with Green Lane Mosque, who are very proactive in meeting social needs and raising issues. So again, there's just such great potential for working together as faith communities around this common purpose, all of us coming together to protect our next generation. And so I'm just going to share my slides now. So I'm going to give you a bit more information about what the Faith Alliance is. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ziba to give a bit more information about exploitation and the forms that that takes, because exploitation is very much closely connected with the violence that we see on our streets. And then we'll conclude with just a little couple of slides about an upcoming campaign that we're helping to support in the run-up and during the Commonwealth Games, trying to raise awareness of human trafficking, the risk of that during big sporting events such as the Commonwealth Games. And then I believe we've got some time for questions at the end. But I'll run through this because I'm conscious that my colleague Ziba needs to get away for another engagement. But yes, if any questions, I'm happy to answer at the end. So as I've mentioned, that the Violence Reduction Partnership is part of the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and our remit is to work together with all these different sectors I've mentioned to reduce levels of serious youth violence. And the approach that we take, as I've said, is the public health approach, and that really has four main key principles. One is about prevention of violence, so not just waiting to respond to violence when it happens and try to pick up the pieces, if you like, but really to try and go upstream to look at the causes of the issues that we see in our community, and to prevent them early on so that they don't develop into violence and don't develop into lives being lost. We also really want to emphasize the importance of partnership working between different organizations, communities and sectors, because it's about bringing our different strengths together and understanding that we all have, we all work with young people in different contexts, and young people need to be given the same message, a consistent message throughout their engagements with local authority or the charity sector. And each of them have what's called teachable moments. So whether that's the school environment, is it a teachable moment for young people, or even the doctor's surgery or the youth club. All of these are where professionals or charity workers, youth workers encounter young people and can potentially, support them in a way that maybe those young people have been let down in other settings. Evidence as well, making sure that all of our work is underpinned by really good evidence and data, to make sure that what we're funding, we know what we're funding works in terms of helping to see the outcomes that we want to achieve. And so there's a lot of kind of research that goes into our work and working closely with data and so on. And then finally, but most importantly in the work that I do, is around community co-production. And that's really but to say that we are committed to working with our communities to make sure that they have a significant and meaningful voice in the work that we do, help to devise our strategies, help to decide what kind of interventions and projects that we commission, and really kind of help to listen to their views, because they're the people living on the ground. They're the people who know their communities best, and so their input is incredibly valuable to our work. And of course, many of the interventions that we commission are given, run by charities, and many of the charity workers themselves are locally based and know their communities and the young people well. So it completely makes sense that we need to be working strongly in partnership with, and not to, working on our communities, or working, against the wishes of community. We want to make sure that we're working strongly in partnership. Just emphasize that the Faith Alliance is one strand of the various work streams that we have within the Violence Reduction Partnership, and that reflects the vast variety of different sectors that we're trying to engage, as you can see here. You can see that we're in links to education. Can I just confirm that the slides are moving on? Zebra, can you see those?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's moving on.
Okay. Sometimes it can stay on the first slide, which is a bit annoying. But we work closely with schools. We work closely with the health sector, with criminal justice system, sports, tackling exploitation, which Zeba will go on to talk about, but also in particular locales, particular local neighbourhoods, and that's our place-based approach. These are areas of the West Midlands which we know have higher rates of youth violence, and so those are areas which we really want to commission projects, see what works, test what works, and if successful, to expand across the region. But the Faith Alliance, as I've said, is quite unique actually across the country in terms of championing the role of faith communities and faith-based approaches in helping to tackle violence. So the purpose of the Faith Alliance, we exist as a network, as a multi-faith network to equip, enable and empower communities of all faiths and none across the West Midlands to further understand and prevent serious youth violence. And as I've said, we're a network, a forum bringing together faith leaders, representatives, faith-based organisations and groups around this agenda. But we're also keen to complement the public health approach with faith-based approaches, because faith communities have been doing work around preventing violence and responding to violence, for a long time, and it's built into many of their scriptures and their beliefs about the importance of non-violence, about the importance of being peaceful in terms of seeking to the common good and trying to work with our neighbours, even though they have differences to us. We want to work. There's a strong ethic of wanting to build peace. But it's not just an ethic, it's also a set of practices. And so, we find examples across the West Midlands of churches, mosques, gurdwaras, mandirs, already taking the initiative based on their own beliefs about, the importance of protecting life. They're not just going to wait for the local authorities to do work. They're going to take the initiative and support young people through youth clubs or other methods, pastoral care. And so we want to learn from our faith communities and say, what are they already doing? What do they do which works? We know protects young people, and to really inform local authorities and police and to combine that with the public health approach as we move forward. We have two co-chairs who lead the network. They are the Reverend Dr. Carver Anderson, who is a church leader in Birmingham, and Kamran Hussain, who is the CEO of Green Lane Mosque, which I mentioned earlier. And now we have over 200 individuals who are part of our network as of July this month. It's encouraging over the last year how much interest we've seen and people coming on board around this agenda and wanting to be involved and wanting to be equipped to play a role to help prevent violence. But still 200 people is still a drop in the ocean when it comes to the level of need in our region, but also the drop in the ocean compared to the number of places of worship and faith leaders who are there. So it's still an ongoing challenge to and mission to engage as many faith leaders as we can, give them ideas about how to challenge violence and to make our communities safer so that we can have the most impact, because there is so much potential that faith communities have. But at the moment, we're only scratching the surface. And so it's great to have opportunities like this to speak to the Hindu Council of Central England, to share the message about what we're doing, but also to invite you to partner with us and to serve the young people of our region together. So just give a quick bit of background. We haven't emerged from a vacuum, and there's been a lot of work which has led to the Faith Alliance. The Reverend Dr. Carver Anderson, one of our two co-chairs, he wrote something back in 2017 called the Gangs and Violence Commission, and that identified a number of recommendations for government about how to tackle violence, but he also identified the role of faith communities as an untapped component in this work. And so really since then, with the establishment of the Faith Alliance before the pandemic, but we've seen a lot of growth after the pandemic, and as faith communities prioritize the needs of meeting the needs of which arose as a result of the pandemic. Since lockdown has lifted, we've seen a lot more energy being focused on this work around violence reduction, and so as I said, we're trying to capitalize on that at the moment, that goodwill. Why engage with faith communities? I don't think probably need to persuade you of this, but for some audiences, sadly, there's sometimes a misunderstanding of the role of faith communities in the public square. But I don't need to convince you about how important faith communities are in terms of the very many kind of ways that they're help to society. You can look at the debt relief, you can look at food banks, you can look at family support. All of these ways are out of the goodness of people's hearts and are often, self-funded. And so, there's a lot of really good work going on. With regards to violence reduction, there's a lot of for a long time, faith communities, faith leaders have been asked to respond to violence and have, helped to console families, console communities, help to call for an end to retaliation and revenge. But more than that, we want to champion the role that faith communities have in preventing violence before it happens. And we've kind of grouped these into two main areas, and these include providing young people with protective factors against the negative influences that they find in society. So whether that be part of belonging to a church or a mandir, a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, positive role models and peer groups, pastoral support and resilience. And these aren't all things that all young people have access to, but these are things that if you belong to a faith community, you have greater access to. And similarly, the assets and resources that faith communities have need to be better mobilized for the benefit of young people. So things like buildings, things like volunteers, resources, social needs projects, and that community voice, because it's that trust that faith communities have, which is so valuable, and which organizations like the police wish they had more of in terms of that trust. But it's in partnership that we can do so much more together. Just to give you an example of, I'm a Christian, and having grown up in the church, I've seen, sadly, the church halls is a classic example of a building which is actually a really great space, but actually goes underused during the week. It's maybe used on a Sunday or maybe once on a midweek evening, but for the rest of the time it's closed. But actually that's a really valuable space for young people after school when they're most vulnerable, particularly in the context of cuts to youth services. So actually at this point, I'm just going to take a pause and hand over to my colleague Zeba, who's going to have to head off soon. If that's all right, Zeba, I can just introduce you and talk a little bit more about some of the risks that young people are facing in society. Can I do that now?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you right just to put the slides up for that, Fred?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. So whilst Fred is getting the slides up, so as you saw from the presentation, there was different thematic areas that Fred was going through that the VRP actually work on. So one of those areas is we focus on exploitation. And the reason why we focus on doing work around exploitation is that we believe that exploitation and youth violence is not mutually exclusive, and there is a heavy link between youth violence and exploitation, and they should be seen through the same lens and not in silo. So for example, exploitation can potentially be the front door to youth violence, and young people who are exploited could or tend to be at higher risk of experiencing violence and intimidation and threats through that exploitation. So just in terms of exploitation and defining the term, we in the VRP Violence Reduction Partnership consider exploitation as a form of abuse where someone is forced or coerced into doing things for the benefit of others. So when we think about exploitation can happen to anybody. Can happen anywhere, despite what their religion is, what their age is, what their gender is, what their race is. It doesn't, discriminate in terms of social class, ethnicity. So anybody can be exploited, but equally anybody can be an exploiter as well. So as you can see on the slide where we've got the comment at the bottom there. So it's a deliberate maltreatment and manipulation or abuse of power and control, and it's really important to focus on those terms in terms of that the abuse and misuse of power and control, because it is that coercion that makes it exploitative, and then taking the advantage of another person or their situation, and that is done for personal gain. And sometimes on the outside it could appear as if it is consensual, and the person who's being exploited may seem that it's been consensual, but in actual fact, when you look into the model of exploitation and grooming, it often isn't exploitation, it often isn't consensual, because that person who is being exploited is being coerced and manipulated, and there is that power imbalance in that. So when we think about exploitation, as I said, it's a form of abuse where people can be groomed, and I said people may not recognize that they are being exploited until the situation may actually become very serious. So exploitation can take place in many forms, in a range of different situations, and can involve either one group or many groups of people. And when we mention that term exploitation, there are actually 17 typologies of exploitation. So we've got on the screen there, one type of exploitation is child sexual exploitation, which some of you may have heard of before. So with regards to sexual exploitation, it's a form of sexual abuse where people are encouraged or manipulated or forced to participate in various actions, such as sexual actions. They may be threatened by violence again, or groomed to offer, or groomed by offers of affection or money or gifts as part of that. So we in the Violence Reduction Partnership, when we're referring to child sexual exploitation, we refer to it as a form of child abuse, and the victim may be exploited, not just physically, but it can be done online as well. So during the pandemic and during COVID, we've seen higher trends of child sexual exploitation actually take place online, which is a lot more dangerous because of the hidden harms and not being able to trace who the actual abuser and the manipulator is behind that. So in regards to exploitation and child sexual exploitation, that theme of violence, coercion, and intimidation are really common. But just to do some myth busting there as well, it's not just common to girls and women being sexually exploited, and sexual exploitation can happen in conjunction with criminal exploitation as well, which we'll touch upon on the next slide. So when we think about criminal exploitation, so this is when a child, again, coerced, controlled, or manipulated or deceived into committing criminal acts. So a common term that people may have heard of is county lines. So county lines is a form of criminal exploitation whereby children or young people might be manipulated, forced, coerced into carrying drugs, carrying out other kinds of criminality actions such as theft, carrying knives, committing credit card fraud, or forced begging. So these are all forms of criminal exploitation. It's not just county lines that forms that picture of criminal exploitation. So as part of the criminal exploitation model as well, that grooming picture also takes place. So where children and young people can be trapped by something what we call with debt bondage. And again, just to do some myth busting around criminal exploitation and county lines, victims can also be girls as well as boys. So we may often think that if it's county lines or criminal exploitation, it just impacts boys and men, and if it's sexual exploitation, it just impacts girls and young women. However, often it's because of the way it appears in the data, and sometimes we may come across a female and not view that as being criminal exploitation or being a victim of criminal exploitation and put them into one category. But one form of exploitation doesn't necessarily mean that that is the only abuse that they've undergone. There could be very many different types of exploitation or violence that could be intermingled into that experience of that child and young person. So a couple of things that I haven't mentioned, because we've just very briefly mentioned two types of the sexual exploitation and the criminal exploitation, but there are also other forms such as radicalization is classed as a form of exploitation as well. So the process which people could come to support increasingly extremist or political or religious ideals, and this can also lead to them, being supportive of violence and extremism and terrorism. So there is that link to radicalization as a form of exploitation to violence as well. And another term just to mention is modern slavery. So modern slavery comprises of that wider picture around criminal exploitation as well. So it's a recruitment and movement or harboring or receiving children through the use of force, again, coercion, abuse, or their vulnerability for the means of the purpose of the exploitation. So Fred will go onto slightly a bit later in terms of the exploitation, modern slavery and human trafficking exploitation campaign that we have in the West Midlands around the Commonwealth Games, which you can understand a bit more around the push and pull factors and the indicators and signs around that. But just to put it into context in terms of the fate settings and how you may be able to spot a child who may be exploited and what you can do. So just on the previous slide, sorry, Fred. So how can you identify if a child or young person is coming into your space may be exploited? What could be some of the signs? So we've just got on the screen there, if you are in regular contact with a child in your faith spaces and they attend maybe your clubs or your groups or your prayers, and all of a sudden they're starting to go missing from those, that could be a sign that something else is going on. You can notice it in their behavior if they become distant or withdrawn. Sometimes it could be unexplained injuries. So if you've noticed that they're coming with bruises, that could be a sign of abuse or further exploitation taking part. If that child or young person is usually quite open, but all of a sudden you've noticed a change in that behavior and they're becoming secretive about friends or the places that they're visiting, that could, raise that professional curiosity to think what else might be going on in that picture. Another sign that we've got in there is children and young people may be receiving more texts and calls than usual. And this is a sign that's heavily linked to the criminal exploitation and county lines aspect of it. So constantly fearing that they can't miss a call because they're being exploited. So again, that's another sign that we've got on there. And then concerns that other people may have about them. So if you are particularly interacting with that person and maybe a friend has come to you to say that they're slightly worried and asking you how they've been behaving in your context, in your setting, that could be a cause for concern to say that, okay, what else is going on in that picture? And then onto the right side of the screen, we've also got other signs that you can look out for in terms of change of friendship groups, that change in behavior becoming defensive or aggressive, or the change of the language that they use in the way that they're speaking. Are they using more slang words? Have you noticed a change in that sense? Or if you've noticed that they might be misusing substances, so using drugs or alcohol, or if you have come into contact with them or they've disclosed to you that they're carrying weapons or any drug paraphernalia or large amounts of cash has been identified on them. So these are just some of the signs that you can notice that a child may be being exploited. Not necessarily to say that, you know, if a child goes missing that they're definitely being exploited, but typically we have found that these are some of the indicators that could suggest that something else is going on. And, you know, you might want to raise that to like a designated safeguarding lead, or raise that to the local authorities, or put in a safeguarding concern to your local neighbourhood policing units, because any information that you do have could be forming part of a bigger picture for that young person. So just moving on to the next slide. We've got a bit of a case study here, just to get you guys to think about. Usually when we do the training, we do this as an activity, but I know we're conscious for time and probably not going to get much time to go into it. But I've just highlighted there just a little case study about Yusuf, who attends his local faith space for prayer services every week since he was a child. He's now 15 years old. So when he attends the studies, he also goes to the faith space, and his demeanor is quite polite and he's quite a calm young person. But recently, Yusuf has missed, you know, the last 3 prayer services. And when he did attend, after missing 3, you noticed that there were some bruises on his wrists and ankles. So just going back to what I mentioned about noticing some of the signs, this is something that you can pick up on unexplained injuries. So again, another a factor to just raise that alarm bell in your mind to think what else might be going on with Yusuf in that situation. So in addition to that, in this case study, Yusuf's also been going missing from his studies and his groups, and when he does attend, he's quite reserved, so he's withdrawn. So you've noticed that change in his behaviour as well, and usually he's engaged, but you've noticed now that he's quite disengaged. So again, something like this would spark a cause for concern for you to further interrogate or further ask the questions to understand what else is going on for Yusuf in his contextual setting. And then the last line on there as well, just to notice that his friendship group has changed as well. So when he's leaving the faith spaces, you've noticed that he's been received by the older males and females who pick him up in their cars, and it's not consistent friendship groups or anybody that you're familiar with. So this again could be another sign or indicator that a change of friendship group could mean that they are being manipulated or coerced or abused by older people. So stuff like that would raise a concern for you to think, okay, should I speak to Yusuf about this? What else can you do? So yeah, just got a few pointers on that slide there, just to get you thinking about, based on that case study, what are the things that you would be concerned about? What sparks in your head to think, what else is going on for Yusuf there? And then thinking about what could you do in your spaces. So just to raise your awareness around this, we're not asking anybody to be investigators or intervene, especially if it may not mean that it's safe for you to do so. But in your spaces, just simply asking the questions or raising that professional curiosity, or taking down the note of the registration of a car that may be coming. It might be really vital information that you can collect to pass on to a local authority if you're going to go down the sort of local authority child services route, or to the police, or through to crime stoppers, because you can crime stoppers, you can report that anonymously if you don't feel comfortable actually speaking to the police. So yeah, on this slide, we've just got a few pointers of what you can actually do in your faith spaces to recognise the signs and indicators, some of which we've mentioned today, to be able to empower you to report them and have that effective response to it as well. We've also got great resources and tools such as the Faith Toolkit that's recently been put together by the Violence Reduction Partnership that you can use to educate and inform yourselves and other young people and people coming into your spaces around young people and what risks factors they may pose in terms of exploitation. and various other things that you could do there. But your faith spaces itself, just having your faith spaces, just having that space could also be a positive thing that you're doing, because you may be offering that safe space for children and young people to come into, and having those reports and relationships with you. You could be that person where they may be disclosing something or felt comfortable to come in there. That could be a protective factor for them as well. So just having that physical space available for them is doing a lot of good in terms of offering them somewhere to come to where they feel safe in that environment. The next slide following that, and I'm more than happy for Fred to share the slides, is just some of the offers whereby the VRP can support you in terms of providing training, free training to professionals. If you want to find out a bit more about the 17 typologies of exploitation, we do bespoke training around sort of safeguarding and safety planning with young people, if anybody's interested in that. So whatever your needs are, we can tailor the training to that. And we can also attend and support with tactical advice if you come across a specific case and you're unsure about what to do. I'm conscious we've only got sort of 4 minutes left of the webinar, so I'm going to pause there. Our contact details are on the next slide if you want to find out a bit more about what the exploitation team offer in the Violence Reduction Partnership.
Thanks, Ziba. Let's see if I can stop sharing. Yeah, that was really helpful. Jazz, how much time have we got left on the presentation side?
You can, what's the time? Sorry, I've got, well, it's almost 9 o'clock, but we did start late, so probably got a few minutes left, about 5.
Okay, that's no problem. I think Ziba's going to have to head off. Thank you, Ziba. But I'll just conclude. So yeah, Ziba's just talked about, the range of protective factors that faith places of worship can provide. As a Faith Alliance, we see, I'm going to zoom in on this one. There's youth spaces here on the right hand side of this spider diagram. It's just one of the various ways that faith communities can help prevent youth violence. Listed here are things like training, which we've mentioned, communications, raising awareness, campaigns, education, working closely with schools, providing diversity awareness training, conflict resolution work in schools, pastoral care, all those ways that faith communities help survivors of abuse, of modern slavery, exploitation, and linking those up. Chaplains example as another example, linking those pastoral care supporters together to share that best practice. Hospitality, again, all that ways that faith communities feed their communities, look after their communities, provide services to communities. Nurturing families, recognizing that having a strong supportive family context is a great environment for young people, and so supporting parents to be as good parents as they can be within the context of a wider community is really key. And then tackling exploitation and abuse, as we've spoken about, making sure that our safeguarding within our places of worship is as strong and robust as it possibly can be. Recognizing, sadly, that there have been failures in safeguarding across the faith communities in the past, and so it's really important that we learn from those failures. Toolkit, which was mentioned, I've got a copy just on my desk here, and I think Jazz has a copy, but we're actually we've got hard copies that we can make available to people, but we've also got an online digital version which we're going to be sharing on our website probably tomorrow. So keep an eye out on our website. Do just Google Violence Reduction Partnership West Midlands, and have a read of that, because it's a resource which a lot of people have contributed to, and including the Hindu think tank UK, who provided a theological justification from a Hindu perspective about what scriptures and beliefs and values from the Hindu tradition are important when we're thinking about why a Hindu community, for example, should be responding to the issues that we see in society. Similar exercises have been done with the Muslim community, the Christian community, the Sikh community, and the Jewish community in their toolkit. So we've asked faith leaders to reflect on their own scriptures and say, why is it important that my community takes action on this? But the toolkit also contains a lot of practical recommendations and a library of good practice case studies. Just on a final note, we've mentioned the Commonwealth Games, and the It's a Penalty is an organisation which is running this campaign raising awareness of human trafficking and modern slavery, because we know sadly that when big sporting events happen throughout the world, the flow of the large flow of people going through a particular area means that people are more vulnerable to being trafficked, to being exploited. And so it's really important that local people on the ground, but also local businesses, hotels, travel agency, travel operators are made aware of the signs of exploitation, some of which Zebra has just explained. And so this is what we're doing in Birmingham and across the West Midlands during the Commonwealth Games. So some of the things which the campaign wants to do is, as I've said, raise awareness, protect vulnerable people and children, and prevent crimes through changing behaviours, reducing demand for exploitation and human trafficking by raising awareness and increasing reporting among communities, and creating a positive legacy for Birmingham and the UK by being proactive and taking the most of this opportunity to raise awareness of the darker sides of lots of people coming together in one place. Obviously, we want to celebrate the Commonwealth Games and everything it's going to bring, but sadly there are negative side effects when so many young people, so many people in general, come together. And so we're pinning up posters, we're distributing business cards with the signs of exploitation and how to report it across the West Midlands. And that's, again, something we'd love to partner with you all on, is about putting those posters up in your temples and mandirs, sharing those business cards with your community, sharing on social media as well, the campaign film and the posters which are available in different languages as well. And so really trying to raise awareness among our local faith communities of what exploitation looks like and how it can be reported. So this is our last slide, really, just to say, if you'd like to be involved in the work of the Faith Alliance, if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to contribute to discussions, strategy, and how we go forward, then please email me. That's my email address on the screen. Jazz can also send it out to you as a network, but we'd love to connect with you, we'd love to learn from you, and we'd love to support you to do even more good work in the community. So that's all we've got to share this evening, but yeah, keen to answer questions too. Thank you.
Right.